Do the Mamer in Maimorim Melukot in Chelik Daled. This is the 38th Mamer. This is a little bit different. In the back of the Maimorim, they printed Maimorim which are not fully Muga. This is actually, as it's stated here, this is a Hanocha Bilti Muga, which means that the Rebbe did not look over this Maimer. However, uh, the first opening part of the Maimer, the Eileh Masei, also the ending part of the Maimer, was added by the Rebbe to a Maimer of the Rebbe Rashab, in which he said, in Tov Reish Ayin Tes, in Ateres, in the year Ateres. So the opening and the end of the Maimer, the Rebbe was Magia, and therefore they put it in also in this book. It says here, the Maimers, the Rebbe said in Shabbos Parshas Matis Masei, which was Mevorchim HaChodesh Menachemov. And in the note, it says that they printed the Maimer in Sefer HaMaimorim, uh, uh, is the Maimer Zohar Avaye in Tofresh Ateres, in Tofresh Ayin Tes, in quotes the Maimer, and there's some changes and the Rebbe started this Maimer with Eileh Masei and ended it with Eileh Masei, explaining this, but the whole other part of the Maimer is from the Maimer of Ateres with some changes. And the Rebbe looked over and was Magia at the beginning and end of the Maimer. And the Maimer of Zohar Havai in Ateres, which has been published. So over there, it's is the this is what it says over there in that Maimer that the Rebbe looked it over, because this Maimer the Rebbe wasn't Magia, this Maimer itself. It has several ha'oris and marmekoimis of the Rebbe, which they quoted. This was in the year Tovshin Yud Gimel. The Rebbe sent later on this booklet to many people, and as we see in the Maimorim, the Rebbe said about this Maimer, it talks about the remembrance that we're asking Hashem to remember us. Hashem, we ask Hashem to remember us. Hashem asks us to remember Him, as this will be the discussion in the Maimer. And we see this, that the Rebbe sent this Maimer to several different people. So we'll do this Maimer now. So Shabbos B'Saiti Yedishmaya, Shabbos Parshas Mate Masei, Mevorchim HaChodesh Menachemov, Heitov Shin Yud Gimel, and this is Anocha Biltin Muga. So the pasuk says, Eileh Masei B'nei Yisrael. This is a plural. These are the journeys. So the Rebbe is going to ask several questions. This is not what the Maimer that the Rebbe is going to bring down from Ateres, but this is an opening that the Rebbe added because the Rebbe said it that Shabbos, so he opened up with something of the Parsha, and he ends with something with the answering this question of the Parsha. So the Rebbe brings down several questions on the beginning and the opening of the Sedra, of the Parsha of Eileh Masei. So the Pasuk says, in the plural, these are the journeys of the Bnei Yisrael, Asher Yotzu Meretz Mitzrayim, that they have gone out from the land of Egypt. So when you read the Masos, you read the journeys, the first journey they went out of Mitzrayim, but then the other journeys were in the desert until they came to Yarden Yerecha, until they came to the Eretz Yisrael. But why does it say Eileh Masei? These are the journeys going out of Eretz Mitzrayim. If it would have said these are the journeys that they journeyed in the desert, yes, there was a lot of journeys. But from Eretz Mitzrayim, there was only one journey. Technically, that's the first question the Rebbe asks. So the pasuk says, "Eileh Masei b'nei Yisrael asher yotzu Eretz Mitzrayim," the journeys of the Bnei Yisrael left Mitzrayim, and then the pasuk says. Vayichtav Moshe recorded, he wrote down, Es Moitzaehem Masei Megomer. this that they're going out for the journey, and the Eileh Masei and then the pasuk repeats, and these are the journeys coming out. So you have several different things here. First of all, the pasuk duplicates it, it changes the lashon, and it says that Moshe wrote it down. Moshe wrote the whole Torah. This is all the questions where the Rebbe is going to ask now, known on these psukim. Yadua had the yukim shabazeh. So the known questions that we have, the yukim, the issues on this pasuk. Mamer Eileh Masei. First of all, he says these are the journeys. Sholosh Rabim, which is a plural, u'mesayim, and then he concludes Asher Yotzu me'eretz Mitzrayim, that they have gone out from the land of Mitzrayim. Asher me'eretz Mitzrayim, but when you look the journey from Eretz Mitzrayim, Hurak Yitzia v'Nisia Rishona is only the exit, and the first journey was outside of Mitzrayim. So it should say Eileh Masei, Zois Masei Me'eretz Mitzrayim, or Eileh Masei b'nei Yisrael in the desert, but not Eretz Mitzrayim. There was only one, the first journey. Urak Yitzia v'Nisia Rishona. So that's one issue on the pasuk. Other issue is, why do we need to say here Moshe wrote this down? But Moshe wrote down the whole Torah. Why mention it over here? Gam einem move on Emrei. Also, we don't understand why he says Vayichtav Moshe, that Moshe wrote Shari Kol HaTorah Kula Kosva Moshe Rabbeinu. But the entire Torah was written by Moshe Rabbeinu. So what is he teaching us here, telling us that Vayichtav Moshe, that Moshe wrote this? So again, why have to say here that Moshe wrote it when this is something that Moshe did? The whole Torah Moshe wrote. And what is he teaching that Moshe wrote this? Gam also, Ma'u HaKefel, what is the idea that he duplicates over here? The Motzeyem Lemaseyem, they went out to the journeys, and the journeys that they went out, why does he have to say it twice? It could have said, and they journeyed. Why duplicate it? And also he swaps it around. And he switches the order from the beginning to the end. First he says Moitzeim L'Maseim, and then it says Maseim L'Matseim. He repeats it and he does it in a swapped order. What's the idea? So these are all specific questions on the language of the pasuk. Then the question really becomes, what's the point in telling us all this in the first place? Why do we need to know all this, what the journeys are? And for the things in general, you have to understand why is it important? Why do we need to know the order of the masos? Now, we know there is a explanation for that generation that actually traveled in the desert. Mefarish b'medrash, the medrash gives them an example. Moshe lemelech u'bnoi. It was a story of a king and his son, and they went to a place for healing, and when they went back, the king was counting all the journeys and everything that happened. You know how he lived here, and here you were sick and headaches. Basically, all the problems they had on the way. So here he's going back to all of the journey. So that was something which was important for those people to mention to them, to review what happened over here. So that would explain why the Torah writes it over there. But the question is for us. The Torah is eternal. Avol, Torah nitzchis. The Torah is eternal. V'al korchoch asher sipur zeh negeya b'chol hazmanim u'b'chol hamakom. So we have to say that this story is important in all times and all places, so it has a relevance to us. So why do we need to know where the journeys were? So we understand why it was important to them, but the question is, why are we studying about now about all those journeys? And now the Rebbe goes into the other Mamer. This was the introduction over here, and the Rebbe goes into the other Mamer from Ateres, from the Rebbe Rashab, which talks about the whole idea of remembrance. It talks about that we're asking Hashem to remember, and Hashem is asking us to remember, as we will continue to learn now. In order to understand all the above, we need to first introduce a whole new subject over here till we'll come back to here, to this issues on this pasuk. Biur Bakoshas Knesset Yisrael, to explain the request that Knesset Yisrael, the Jewish community, the gathering of Yidden, are asking Hashem, Zechayir Havayim Hoyolonu Habito Re'ei Escher Poseinu. We say in the davening that we're asking Hashem to remember and Poshet what happened to us. Look and see our shame. But the Baal Shem Tov teaches, the Rebbe brings down that Zechoir Havaye Ma, the level of Ma of the Neshama, Hoyolonu, what happened to us. And Habito Re'ei, you make us see that we should see the shame, what we did for we neglected this Ma. Pirush Baal Shem Tov. So the Baal Shem Tov translate, Gedenk Gott, was es is geworden von unser Ma shebenishama. Remember Hashem, what happened to our Ma of our neshama, of our soul. Guck sich zu und mach uns seendig unsere eigene Schande. Look closely and make us see, realize our own shame. So we're asking Hashem to remember what has happened to our Ma and to help us to look down and help us see our shame. This is we're asking Hashem. We're asking Hashem to remember. But asking Hashem to remember is a follow-up, as we will see, to what Hashem asks us. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, Hashem is asking us to remember Hashem, and that way we would save ourselves from the destruction, from the Churban. The Eibishter asks us to remember Him and not to forget Him. We find that the Eibishter several times in different psukim is going to quote, is asking us to remember Him and to appreciate this that Hashem has done for us, and what Hashem wants from us is to follow the Torah and mitzvahs. And because we didn't remember what Hashem asked from us, that's why came the destruction. And now we have to ask Hashem, Zechair Hashem, during the exile, what's going on with us? Mamer continues, likewise, there is a request to remember HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. The Eibishter is asking the Yidden, from HaKadosh Baruch to the Yidden, that we should remember Hashem. Here we're asking Hashem to remember us, but there is also a request from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that the Yidden should remember. Okay, as we find in the Zohar, in the beginning of the portion B'chukois on this pasuk of Zechor Havayim Ahoyolonu. So we say over there, Shabakoshem Bilmailo Miknesis Yisrael Igamkim Beloshon Zochar, that the request from above from Knesset Yisrael is also in a language that Hashem says, remember. Like the pasuk says, brings down several psukim. The first pasuk he brings down is what the Eibishter is saying to the Yidden Ami, my people, Zechor, no, remember, Zechor, remember, please, Ma Yoatz Bolok Melech Moyov, Uma Ono Isoi Bilom Ben Be'er Gomer. What is that Bolok, the king of Moyer, what he advised, what he seeked, he counseled? He wanted to destroy, he wanted to curse the Yidden. Uma Ono Isoi Bilom Ben Be'er. And what did, in actuality, Bilom Ben Be'er respond with brachas? The Abish says, remember that. And what does the Abish want us to remember for what? Mesayim, and the pasuk concludes, Mo Hashem doirish mimcha gomer. What does Hashem ask of you? Asois mishpat, to do justice, va'avas chesed, to love kindness, v'atznei alechesim elekecha, and walk with God modestly. So Eibishter is asking us to remember so that we should do the right thing, that we should do justice, we should love kindness and walk modestly with Hashem, which basically means that the Eibishter is asking us, remember to do what he did for us so that we should do the right thing. Another pasuk, uksiv. Pasuk says, Choyres baracho bimei bacharusecho goimer ad asher leitechshach shemesh v'goimer. The Eibishter is asking us to remember in our youth. That's the pasuk. The taich of bechorisecha means youth. So we should answer to remember Hashem during our youth, before the sun sets, and before a person dies. That's the pashut pshat. But the way he brings down in the Medrash that the bechorisecha means the chose, like bechira. While there is still a Beis Hamikdash, the Eibishter is asking us, while there is a Beis Hamikdash, we should remember him before the sun sets, before we'll go into Golus. So that's the request of the Eibishter, to remember and avoid Golus by remember while we are in the time of Bechira, the time of Bacharusecha. So we find in the Medrash, Omar lahem hanavi Yisrael, the prophet says to the Yidden, Zichru es beirachem ad shebeis hamikdash kayim. Remember your Creator while the Beis Hamikdash is still in existence. Shenikra Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash is called the chosen. That's Bachorisecha, the days of Bechira, when there's chosen. And the Medrash says further, Ad shebris kuhuna kayemes, while there is still the covenant of the kuhuna, there's still kahanim. The kahanim are also bechira. The Eibusha chose them. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, u'bechayir eisem mikol shivtei Yisrael lekahin, choose him from amongst all the nations of Israel for me to be a kohen. And further, Ad shebris levi kayemes, while the covenant with the Levies in existence, also by a Levi, it says Hashem has chosen him from all the tribes as Leviim. And this is all Bacharusecha, this whole time is chosen. And this is the meaning in the Pasuk. So this is the Medrash says, so this is the meaning in the Pasuk. When the pasuk says Ad Asher Lo Yitachshach Hashemesh, before the sun settles, before the sun goes down, the Tachshach Hashemesh Koyi Al Churban Beis Hamikdash. The sun darkening references the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Tzorich liyos, and needs to be zechoir as beirecha b'mei bacharusecha. Remember, you're created during the day when you have the chosen. You have the Beis Hamikdash, the Beis Habechira, and the Kohanim which were chosen, and the Levi were chosen. Bisman habayis shenikra Beis Habechira, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, which is called the chosen house. So what happened? That's the Bakosha. That's the Abish that asked us. But the Kivan shebizman habayis lekimu bnei Yisrael habakosha milmayla zcheres beirechah. Since during the time of the Beis Hamikdash, the Yidden did not fulfill this request from above. Remember your Creator, and also Zechor no. Remember what Balak wanted to do in Bilam, Aseis Mishpot v'Avas Chesed v'Atznei Elechzim Elekecha, to do justice and love kindness and walk Matas L'Gresham Elekecha. That was the reason for the destruction, because we didn't remember Hashem. And because of this, the time of Golus, we have to ask, remember Hashem, what has happened to us, or what happened to our Ma. Look and make a Sicha Presenu, because now we're in Golus. The Eibishter begged us before Golus to remember Him. And now we have to remember Hashem. So we need to understand, what is the idea over here asking Hashem to remember? Remember, forgetting is applicable to human beings who are limited. They forget things that are in time goes by. But how could we say with the Eibishter forgetting? The Rebbe will explain that when the Yidden don't do mitzvahs, the Eibishter sort of pretends like he removes himself, and we'll see inside. What is the idea of remembering above? We're asking to Hashem to remember. We're saying to Hashem, remember what Mahoilon. To remember and forgetting is remembering is believable, to remember. Forgetting, but to remember, forgetting, meaning that you could forget, that has to do with limitations. Not forgetting is unlimited, is infinite. Forgetting is finite. Finite forget. The reason, the idea, the concept of forgetting is because of limitation. The kiv on shah the mumubal, since a person is limited, all of the person's matters are limited. A person is limited, and all of his matters, aspects of the person, are limited. And therefore, the impression that a person was made on the person, he saw something or he heard something, it's limited, because a person is limited. So the impression of something that he heard or he saw is limited. It's finite. And because of that, it stops later on. That is forgetting. Forgetting meaning that the impression, that's what you knew, is gone, because you're limited. As opposed to remembering, that has no limit. That is because it's not defined, not finite. We can also see this by the human being, which generally is finite, but when it touches a certain part of him which is beyond his limitations, then he remembers. Something which is important touches him to the deep inside the inside of his soul. That means that it's higher than his limitations. He always remembers that. So if the person, something much is deeper than his limitations, Itaka doesn't forget. So since we're saying that unlimited doesn't forget, and Hashem is unlimited, why does he have to remember? What does it mean that he forgets it and we have to remind him, that we're asking him to remember? If he's saying and move on based on this, we don't understand what is the content, the meaning of the request. Going to remember Hashem. Isn't above. Above is without limit. Why do we have to ask above, remembering when it's believable? And the Rebbe will explain now that there are different levels, and there is a level of Atzilus, which things are open. That's like the level of Ponim, because the Ein Sof shines and it's prevalent, prevails in the world of Atzilus. And if there's Blikvul Taka, there is no Zechira. But when it comes down to the level of Biyah, which is already considered the level of Ocher behind, it's not the face revelation of godliness. Over there, we need to sort of remember that in this condition, a Yid who is always on a high level because he has the level of Ponim, he's like connected to Hashem, but when the body comes down in the world and it comes down in Golus, he sort of removes from that level of Ein Sof. So in the level that the person is, you need to bring out that Zechoir. Let's look inside. Who the idea is the Hine Zekorin V'Shicha, remembering and forgetting who Inyan Ponim V'Achar. It's by a person. There's the face of the person. That's where all the qualities of the person are in his face, and then you have the back of the person. You have the two sides of the person. So, Kaviyachol above, we also have the Panim of Hashem, which is Atzilus, and we have the Acher, which is Biyah, or Pnimius V'chitzonius, the inner, which means when open level of godliness, the Panim of Hashem. And we have some places that we don't have the Panim, we only have the Acher, we only have the externality. Just like by the person below. That's something which touches him in his inner. He remembers it all the time. So in the level of Ponim, in the level of Pnimius, you don't forget. But something which is only touches him, important to him, only in his externality, which is the idea of back. So by the back of the person, there is sort of forgetting. By Hashem, in the level of Ponim, there's no forgetting, the level of Bligvul. But in the level of Acher, where the godly shine is only in a way of back, over there is forgetting. Also above, Ponim, we also have the idea of face. And we have Yomin, Small, you have right, left, Acher, and back. We're talking about the front and back, but there's all similar to by a human being. We have these levels as well. It is a Ramaz, like we find in Ramaz, it's on the Zohar, there's a picture of Rab Moshe Zakut. So he says over there that these levels of Ponim, Yemil, Svel, V'Ocher correspond to the four levels of Atzilus, Bri, Yitzia, Asiya. Ksheim, Keneged, Daled, Oil, Meis, Abiyah, corresponding to the four worlds of Abiyah. So Ponim is Atzilus, and Abiyah generally is already the Ocher. And the Rebbe is going to explain now the relationship between Atzilus with higher, with Lifnat Tzimtzum, and Abiyah, that Atzilus is the Ponim of the Ein Sof, and Abiyah is the Ocher of Ein Sof. The Hine Olam Atzilus Nikra Ponim. The world of Atzilus is called Ponim. The Kshem Shebe Ponim Sheba Odom Yesh Nepnimis Achai is just like in the face of a person exists the inner of his vitality. Kamakein Ba'atzilus Hu Pnimius Ein Sof. Likewise, in Atzilus is the inner of the Ein Sof. To such an extent, the experience of Atzilus is the inner of Ein Sof, that we say She'iu v'chayev v'garmoy yichad. Iu Hashem, the Ein Sof, with the energy, that's the oilus of Atzilus. Garmoy, that's the garment, the kelim of Atzilus. Archad are one, because what comes in Olam HaAtzilus is the inner Ein Sof. That's where Ein Sof is. So now he's going to explain, while Atzilus is after the Tzimtzum, but yet it is still the Ein Sof. He's going to explain that there is a difference between the Tzimtzum that is in Atzilus and the Tzimtzum that goes from Atzilus to Biyah, which is a parsa, which is a curtain. The Tzimtzum of Atzilus is like the light coming through a hole or a window, which is limited by the hole and the window size, but it's the same oir. But the oir that comes through the parsa, going to Biyah, it's an oir shel tulda. It's a new oir. It's not the same oir, so it's not Ein Sof. Behind so he explains. How do we say it's after the tzimtzum? It's after the restriction. The even though Atzilus is after the tzimtzum. Uklolus oir shel achar hatzimtzum hu b'chinas kav kotzer mitzumtzum is in a level of a short and restricted line. It's still the same essence of the light. It's the same light. It's the Oir Ein Sof, but it's a shorted and a restricted version, but it's not a different light. As opposed to explain the Oir Shel Parsis and Oir Shel Tulda, it's like a new light. This is the difference between Bri Yitzirus and Atzilus. This half is Biyah. The creation of Biyah is through the curtain. As opposed to the creation coming out of Atzilus is not through a curtain. It's only through a restriction. There's no parsa, no tzimtzum. What's the difference between the parsa and the tzimtzum? That between Biyah and Atzilus there is a parsa, and Atzilus from the Ein Sof is a tzimtzum but not a parsa. But hefresh bein tzimtzum parsa, what's the difference between a tzimtzum and a parsa who kemoshul ha'efresh onuroim lomato? That's like the difference that we see below. From the Moshel, what we see before, Shonuroim Lamato, Bein Ha'or Shemeir Derech Chalin Derech Nekev. The difference between a light that comes through a window or a hole, which means is only a certain area of light that is allowed in through the hole, through the window. Although it's a diminished, the light is diminished and restricted, it's not the full light from the outside. It only shines in that measure. Which the window or the hole are able to contain. Yet it's the same essence of light, is the same light. As opposed to when the sign light comes through a curtain. Then the light changes the essence. It's no longer the same light. To the extent that the oir that comes after the curtain is called an oir shel tulda. It's an oir of a birth. It's a derivative. It's not the same oir. So the oir of Atzilus is a restricted, but the same oir. The oir of Biyah is an oir shel tulda, is like a new oir, new created. So the same is above. Sheishavus Biyah shalidei haparse ubishinamus, the creation of Bria Tzira Sira that goes through a parse that changes the essence, the mahus. Mashiach is havus atzilus shalidei tzimtzum, as opposed to the creation of atzilus, which goes through the tzimtzum. It's not a parse. Even though the light over there is restricted, still it's the same essence of light like before the tzimtzum. So there is a difference between the tzimtzumim and the way it's in Atzilus, which is a tzimtzum, but it's the same oir, and in Biyah, in which is an oir shel tulda. So this is from the Eitz Chaim that the Biyah is through a parsa, and Atzilus is a regular tzimtzum. But the Rebbe is going to explain now that also in Atzilus there are parsas as well. But those curtains and those parsas are not blocking parsas, but they're actually revealing parsas. Because in order to reveal, you need oisius, you need the limitation to put down the idea in the cover so that they could receive it. It's the part that reveals. We bring a mushel from skin. There is skin of the animal, which you work it through in a tannery. It's a thick, separate layer on the animal. It's not part of the flesh of the animal. It's separate. And then you have the skin of a person. It's also skin, but it's on the flesh. It's just a thin part over the flesh, and it's part of the flesh. So there is a oira skin, which is part of it, and there is a separate skin. Let's look inside. Even though also in Atzilus there are curtains or covers, as known between Keser and Chochma within Atzilus, there is a curtain between Bina and Zer Ampin and the Midas, Uben Zola Malchus and Zola Malchus. So we have curtains there. It's a different kind of a curtain. It's not similar. They're not compared. The parsa that is in Atzilus, la parsa is the biyah to the curtain of biyah. Sha parsa is the biyah, the curtains, the covers of biyah. In Yonam hulahalim, their matter is there to block. And they obscure, they block the light. As opposed to the covers in Atzilus, Hey megalim ha'or, they reveal the light. They're not blocking, they're revealing the light. There is the container, the to be able to reveal it. In a parsa, parsa is like a skin. And there's different in skins. There's a skin which blocks, and there's a skin which says skin, which is part of the flesh. But Amru Chazal, our sages tell us, Elu she'oriseyem kibsoram, which skin is like part like in the flesh. Oira Adam, that's the human. There is Oiris of the behema, which is separate. She'ein behema, it's not like the skin of behema shu gas, which is a thick skin. So when we talk about the skin of a human, this is like the parsa, the curtain. It's not a curtain that blocks, but it's like the oir that's reveals the oir. This is the parsois that reveal the light. And the Rebbe brings down now these blocks can also be compared to oisios. Oisios are the garments, the vessels that contain the idea. So we have letters of the name of Hashem. So the name of Hashem, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. And when we spell Yud of Yud-Kei, Yud Vav Dalet, and then you'll spell the Hey of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, Hey Aleph, and Vav, you'll spell Vav Aleph Vav, and then again Hey, Hey Aleph. You'll get the number Ma, you get 45. If you spell it the Hey with a Yud, then you get 52. These letters are the revelation of the Shem Havaya as it dresses up to either become the Shem Havaya, which is called the Shem Ma, which is the Oires, which is the Giluyim. That's the Oir Ha'odom. That's the parsa that reveals. Or you get the letters of 52 Ban, which is the Shem Ban, which is the level of block, obscurity. That's the parsa of between Atzilus and Biyah, which also makes a big difference, as we'll see, because the level of Ma is a level of bittul b'metzias, the level of Ban is a bittul yesh, as the Rebbe will continue to explain. These two difference between the parsa, which reveals the light or blocks the light, is the difference between the letters. There are letters which total up Ma. That's the Shem Havaya as it illuminates, like in Atzilus. And then there's the level of Shem Havaya, which become Ban, which block. This is the difference between the letters of 45 that come to the 45, La'oisius to the level of Ban. But the Yonam Ba'avodahu, and how do we explain this in the words of service with the different letters? Who afresh ben Oisius HaTorah, the letters of Torah, which is Milmailo, which is Giluyim, which is the level of Ma, and the Oisius HaTfilah, which come from the bottom, which is from the level of Ban. So I said the Oisius, the Ban, Heim Malimin al Ha'ir. The letters of Ban, they block the Oir. So the Shem Havaya gets obscured by the letters Ban. It's like the Oir of the Behema, which is separate. And because of that, Nasim Hanivroin Bebchinas Yesh V'Davar Nifrat. That's why the created being become an entity and something separate because of the Ban, because of the obscurity. Is the Ma, as opposed to the level of Ma, which is also the Parsois, which are in Atzilus, Einam malimim al ha'oir. They don't block the oir. V'adrabah, they become the vehicle to reveal the light. Megalin es oir. They reveal the light. They don't block the light, but reveal the light. That's why they impact the letter of a man, impacts the bittul and the nivroim. And this is also connected to what we say, this is their skin is like their flesh. This is oir adam. Adam is also ma, 45. Aleph Dalet Mem is 45 because that is the revelation of the Oiris Ma. Ki Adam begimatria ma. Vuhu inyan haparsos shemegalan asoir. That's the idea of those covers that reveal the Oir in Atzilus. Shema parsos shema Atzilus. Shem nikra b'shema. That's the curtain Atzilus, which is called Ma. Like we say in the Pasach Eliyahu, we say it on Mincha and Erev Shabbos. From the Zohar, that Shem Ma, the name Ma, the Yu Oirach Atzilus. This is the road of Atzilus is Ma. And that's why also V'zehu Shatzilus Nikra Ponim. That's why Atzilus is called a Ponim, in which there is no Shikha, as we said, but bring about Vishameir Shom Gilu Eirin Sof. Because over there is the Gilu Eirin Sof. Within Atzilus itself, which part is the main Gilu of Ein Sof is in Chochmah. But Chochmah generally is manifest itself in Atzilus, is Chochmah Atzilus. Or even higher Keser, as the Rebbe will explain. The Iker B'chinas Ponim, U'B'chinas Chochmah. The main level of Ponim, we're saying Atzilus is Ponim, but mainly it's Chochmah. And Chochmah is Atzilus, it's the main part of Atzilus. What's the relationship between Ponim, Primis, and Chochmah is but similar. The Pasuk says, Chochmas Odom Toir Ponov, the wisdom of a man shines his face. So we see that the face is associated with Chochmah, which is the Pnimius. Bahainu. And that means Atzilus Meir Eira Chochmah. In Atzilus shines the light of Chochmah. Mamer, like the saying is, Abu Ilah Mekamra B'Atzilus. That Chochmah Ilah, the upper level of Abba, the Chochmah Tato, Malchus is also called Abba. This is Abba Ilah, is in Atzilus. That prevails, that permeates Atzilus. So therefore, the Chochmah, which has the Pnimius Achayis, is Atzilus. Ube Chochmah Meir Ein Sof, and in the Chochmah shines the Ein Sof. Rabbi Nazok and Betanya, as the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, B'Shem Meirei Harava Magid. In the name of his teacher, the Magid, Shebadreg as HaChochma in Yono. What the level of Chochma is, Shehu Levadehu Ve'in Zolosi. That's Ein Sof. He alone is he, there's nothing besides him. So that means that in Chochma shines the level of the Ein Sof. That's, we're saying Chochma. But in even a higher level than in Chochma is in the level of Keser. Well, the Maila Yoser, and even on a higher level, there is the Ein Sof that comes in Atzilus is in Keser. Shabatzilus Meir Oir HaKeser, that in Atzilus shines the sign of Keser, not only of the Chochmah, but all of Atzilus gets permeated, gets shine from the level of Keser. And this is Shezeu Inyan Shema. This is the name of Ma when you get the level of Keser, because as we said before, that you get the number Ma when you spell out Yud K, the K has an Aleph. Aleph represents Keser. So that means that in that level of Yud K Vav K Shema, we have the level of Keser, which contains the Ein Sof. So Shema Shu B'milu Alfim. This is the idea of Shema, which is filled with the Alephs. Yud K, the K is A Aleph. The Aleph was Shviris HaKeser, because Aleph is Pella, is the level of Keser. Number one, it's Aleph, and it's... So now, so what do we come out of all this? That this is Ponim. We were just explaining that Atzilus is Ponim. Kivon shatzilus uponim, u'b'chinas ponim, l'shayich shomin nashikha. So over there, Atzilus, since it's the level of ponim. So in Atzilus, it doesn't apply, it doesn't fit forgetting, no forgetting in Atzilus. Mashen kein, b'biyah shu b'chinas ocher. As opposed to biyah. Biyah is the level of ocher. It's not the pnimius of the Ein Sof isn't shine there. It's the back, it's the chitzonis. Shaykh shamin shikha. That applies to the level of shikha. Now, who does it apply to? It applies to the worlds of biyah. But here, what about the Jewish people themselves? The Jewish people, even in biyah, have a connection to ponim beponim. As long as they do the Ratzon Hashem. But when the Yidden turn away, they turn their backs on Hashem, Kaviyachol, the Eibshter turns it back on them, and we have to ask Hashem to remember us. This is all the difference in the worlds. Atzilus versus Biyah. But as opposed to the neshamas of the Yidden, even as we are here below, we're still in the level of Pnimius of the Ein Sof. Why? The neshamas Yisrael, olu b'machshava. The Yidden's neshama went up in thought. So Poshet, it means they went up to Hashem's thought, but the Rebbe teaches within machshava they went up, within the thought. They are in the highest level. The Hainu b'madreg, in the highest level machshava, which means that the Yidden are pnimis. And the Pasuk says beferish, ksiv, ponim beponim divrei Abaye mochem, Hashem spoke to you face to face. Because Hashem spoke with you, why do we ponim beponim? How do we get the level of ponim? Because the Eibishter spoke to you, gave us the level of ponim. That made up that the pnimis of the Yid becomes the pnimis of above through the Dibur Hashem Mochem. That is the neshama of a Yid all the time, even in Biyah. This is all the neshama itself. But because it descended below, it dresses up in a body in an animal soul. Especially in the time of exile. So in the time of exile, it's written, David says, I will hide my face. And that is the key. Since the Pasuk says they turned their back to me, not the face, they're not serving Hashem anymore with their primis. The avodah was in a way of back. That brings about also from above. Abish says, I will hide my ponai. Because of this, and that's why you have to ask for the idea of memory. Remember Hashem, what happened to the Ma, because we are in the level of Haster Ponim, because the Eibishter turned away from us, we turned away from him, and we have to remember again. And the Rebbe is going to continue to explain the two madregas of the avodah of bittul b'mitzias, the avodah bittul hayesh, as we'll see further in Ois Dalet.